but thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the fair. The first time I attended it in 1996, which would have been its 4th year of existence. At the time, I was completely uninitiated in the art world, but I was captivated. I had recently become interested in the art landscape in New York, but had felt for the most part that there were few points of entry for me in the contemporary galleries I visited in Soho and Chelsea. I didn't have the background to understand many of the installations I was seeing, and with only a peripheral knowledge of contemporary art history, I was at a deficit to relate to what was going on. This left me feeling plenty inadequate and a bit intimidated. None of the gallery staffers seemed even remotely interested in informing me about the artists or the exhibitions. But the Outsider Art Fair was a different story. The works I was seeing seemed very personal, yet accessible. Obsessive, tactile, visceral, they oozed humanity. And the dealers were only too happy to tell me about the work and the artists, many of whose life stories were incredible. In the early days of the fair, the community of outsider art lovers was very insular. They did not seem to be very interested or spend much attention directed towards engaging the mainstream art world, which in all fairness didn't give self-taught art much respect either. Many in the outsider community openly disparaged the mainstream art world. This was never a good strategy for expanding the audience. But this community of dealers and collectors had something special going for it, a passion that bordered on evangelical zeal. And every now and then, a conversion would take place, a new collector or one coming over from the contemporary side. The field began to grow slowly but surely. My purchase of the fair coincided with some watershed events, namely the 2013 Venice Biennale's Encyclopedic Palace exhibition, laden with outsider artists and named after a sculpture in the American Folk Art Museum's collection. If this didn't put the rest of the art world on notice, nothing would. Then major shows at London's Hayward Gallery, the Philadelphia Museum, the Carnegie International, the Brooklyn, so many more, and most recently the Met announced that it will be showing Southern vernacular art next year. These developments meshed beautifully with our strategy for re-energizing the Outsider Art Fair. First, we designated a few booths for specially curated projects that were non-commercial. Then we instituted OAF Talks, a series of panels that kicked off with Massimiliano Gioni, Ralph Rugoff, and Daniel Baumann, discussing the curation of self-taught art in contemporary contexts. A Bridge Between Art Worlds was dynamic, and I invite you all to view it on the film section of the fair's website. We had a panel on Henry Darger, but also one on Basquiat. Last year, Jay Gorney and Anne Duran curated a booth called If I Had Possession Over Judgment Day, which included Adolph Wolfley, Melvin Way, Emery Blagden, and Mark Lombardi, artists who fend off paranoia by making art as talismans against chaos or disaster. In 2013, we featured a solo booth of the art by Ronaldo Cooler, who had imagined an entire fictitious country and culture called Rockaterrania. This year, our curated booths are really going to blow people away. One is called Bobble. An open call has been issued to artists, architects, and model makers to design a tower in the spirit of the great environments like the Watts Towers and the Palais Ideal. The selected designs will be manifested by a 3D printer to create one installation. I closed the deal to buy the fair on Labor Day weekend 2012. We had 4 months to pull it together. Many of the top dealers had already fled the fair, which they felt had been flagging in recent years. I had to get them back. I'm extremely gratified that most of them returned, and I really want to thank Carl Hammer, Rico Maresca, Gallery Saint-Etienne, Kevin Morris, and so many others who gave us a chance. On the Friday morning after that first opening, I nervously opened the New York Times. Roberta Smith's review began, "The Outsider Art Fair, a wonderfully eccentric jewel in the crown of New York art fairs, has a renewed radiance." Well, she just kept going on, and it was incredible. After it was over, we drew almost 10,000 visitors, which was triple over the prior year. The goal that we had was more than the attendance or sales or even the press. It was momentum. And we couldn't squander it by waiting a full year until the next fair. Enter OAF Paris, the site where the history of Art Brut began. with institutions like La Maison Rouge, Palais de Tokyo, Al Saint-Pierre, and more recently Quai Branly, all showing non-mainstream art, there could be some traction for our fair there. But we had to entice dealers by making it affordable. A light bulb went off. A hotel fair. I had been to the Gramercy Art Fair at the Gramercy Hotel in the late 90s and confessed to having been somewhat perplexed when I entered a room only to find 2 naked people on a motorcycle and another fully clothed taking a shower. But we found a boutique hotel with 26 rooms that was perfect, and it was near the Grand Palais, which would be hosting FIAC at the same time. We had new European dealers and enough support from home to make it work. We have just returned from our 3rd year, which we held in a more proper venue, an old chateau near the opera, and we installed proper walls and lights and had 38 dealers. Not that storing bubble wrap in the bathtub or laying out drawings on the bed didn't have a certain charm, but this year was more magnificent and our attendance was up 75% over 2014. But the hotel was great too, because it had edge, and that's what's different about the Outsider Art Fair. Virtually every other art fair features art that is informed by art historical trends and movements, and every smaller or satellite fair exists for the same reason, because Art Basel, Frieze, FIAC, and their ilk just don't have the capacity to fill the demand for booths. The spillover has given birth to Scope, Pulse, Nada, and literally dozens of smaller fairs. But when you come to our fair, you will see art that you cannot find in any of the others. On the contrary, there is a huge overlap amongst contemporary fairs in terms of artists shown. To those who would contend there's no need for an outsider art fair, that it's all just art, ask them to go find self-taught artists in the big fairs. It's a needle in a haystack experience, believe me. Last year, our gallery showed Henry Darger and Marcel Storr at Art Basel Miami Beach, but of the thousands of other artists shown there, maybe 2 or 3 were self-taught. And in spite of the great progress made in the museum community, there's still a long way to go. The new Whitney's inaugural exhibit received tremendous reviews, and many of those reviews mentioned that Bill Traylor, James Castle, and Horace Pippin were included. But that also means only 3 out of 409 artists were self-taught, and this from a show called America is Hard to See. Surely folk and outsider art have played a bigger role in the story of American art than this 7/100% ratio would indicate. Great bodies of American art from Henry Darger to Martin Ramirez, William Edmondson to Bill Traylor and Charles Delshow were lucky to ever have been seen at all. So talk about hard to see. I'm confident that the resurgence of this compelling genre of art will prove more than a cyclical trend and will not recede back into the woodwork. The zeal of this community, combined with the unparalleled recognition from art lovers everywhere, simply won't allow it. Thanks a lot.